from Sydney. It's lovely to be back here again in Kiwi land. As one of the other speakers said just in the break, someone was asked, "Oh, James, what are you talking about?" And he goes, "Oh, it's something intranets." So yeah, that's what we're talking about, something intranets for an hour. And I'm going to get you excited about that, because I know I'm excited. It's an exciting topic, clearly, or you have nothing better to do this morning. So I guess I've been in the intranet space now for, well, a long time, at least 15 years, probably more, depending on how you count it. We've been involved in a vast number of intranet projects, certainly in the hundreds, ranging from huge banks through to 150-person organisations and everything in between. And a lot of what we look at these days is helping teams to succeed. More than anything else, more than the intricacies of the technology platform or the possibilities of the intranet, it's around how do we make sure that the projects that we do actually deliver great outcomes. And so that's what I'm going to talk about for the next hour is, I guess, the lessons learned from those hundreds of projects with some tips, some tricks and some opportunities for you guys to ask questions or heckle. Your choice, I don't mind. So why am I here? So I guess I said, hey, I've been in this space for a long time. I've written some books. The most recent one is Squares, following on from Dots and Stripes. So they're very brightly coloured. They make your office happier. They may be useful for other things, but that's the most important thing. I said I'm going to give away 3 copies of the book via a mechanism that will become apparent as the session unfolds. As I mentioned, we're not techies. We don't sell stuff. We don't build stuff. We help organisations at, I guess, hopefully the beginning of the journey, sometimes the middle or after the end, to actually answer a lot of the why and the what questions before people get stuck into actually building the things. So that's where we fit into the scheme of things. So let me start, I guess, with the fun stuff. So let me talk about some of the things you might want to do, some of the things that modern intranets can do. So like all my presentations, I'm going to include a bunch of examples. I believe all but 2 of them are SharePoint examples, although really that's neither here nor there. So I guess I'll start with what you might consider to be a classic intranet project. This is a project we were directly involved in for what is actually now News Corp Australia, what was then News Limited, around creating for them their very first corporate intranet just 18 months ago, which you might think is a bit late to the game, but this is what happens when you're made up of 19 different newspapers that historically have operated entirely in isolation. And so what they needed was a proper corporate intranet as they became a proper company. And I'll talk more about that later. And it's got the classic stuff, I guess, you would expect to see on a modern intranet. So a fair bit of comms, you know, your hero news story, the videos, the commenting on news, all of the rest of that stuff, plus obviously the content and the supporting information behind that. By the way, the slides will go up on the site somehow if you can't quite see all the details, and I'll be blogging it, and it is already up on SlideShare, so you can have a go and look at it there. But okay, so let's push it up a bit. So this is one of my favourite examples that I've talked about for a few years now. So this is from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. So they were in the process of quietly downsizing because they weren't really needed anymore in the world. Because in part, countries were generally richer, also because countries tended to support each other in the emerging economies, but also because people largely hated their guts. Because they were the mean parent. They came in and bailed you out but gave you a pile of rules you had to follow about fixing your economy. It was a real pain in the backside. So they're quietly downsizing, and they're well on the way to reducing 1/3 of their staff when this little thing called the global financial crisis happens. And suddenly now they've gone from being you know, an important but quiet behind-the-scenes organisation that moves at a slow and steady pace to suddenly now being pitched into rescuing countries where decisions aren't made monthly or weekly, but maybe even daily now. And they are now front page news around the globe. And so they've discovered, though, that wait a mo, a whole heap of our most experienced staff have just left and bugger. So now we don't have easy access to all the knowledge we had before. And they recognised that maybe they could address this through the use of their intranet. And so they created pages like this, what they called All About a Country. So this is all about Argentina. So it has at the top some blogs, it has maps, it has the knowledge exchange documents, that is the key internal reports that are so sensitive they're blurred out. It does, of course, have numbers on the right, the stats, but also the key contacts, who are the country experts, who are the people in country at this point. And they credit this for helping to transform how they work as an organisation, despite the fact this created absolutely no new information at all. It's simple stuff, but it's beautiful. Right? And again, really easy to deliver in SharePoint. This is an example that I saw probably a month or two ago. So Kohls, you know, one of our two huge supermarkets in Australia, has, depending on how you count it, say 100,000 staff, the vast majority of whom are in stores. Funnily enough, you have a challenge on how to communicate to them because they don't have email addresses, they don't have access to the traditional corporate intranet, there aren't kiosks. So how do we communicate to them? Well, stuff stuck on notice boards and stuff word of mouth and a whole pile of printed things sent out in boxes and packages and stuff like this. So this is an intranet delivered specifically and solely for staff in stores. They have done a spectacular job at generating staff engagement. But around that, all of that staff engagement thing, about all of the stuff that Kohls is doing, about the current campaigns and initiatives, but actually about all the goodies you get when you work at Kohls. So every week there is some discount. So just for staff, you can buy, you know, 5 tins of Campbell's soup for $1, or whatever it happens to be. But of course, staff generally didn't find out about this stuff. So now they can. It's delivered actually on an external site, in the cloud. So this is all Office 365 and all the rest of that sort of stuff. It's secure, of course, but it means they can access it on their phone, they can access it from home, they have put in some kiosks in the stores, and it is a really, really lovely example of how to do something that actually has some passion. And there's some lovely videos about this and a whole pile of other stuff. So they've entered into this year's Intranet Innovation Awards. Fair chance they're going to get a trophy, I would say, although we haven't finished our judging yet, but you're likely to be able to read the case study as a result. And I think this shows an example of where we're starting to push intranet design forward a step. So this is the HR landing page at Telstra. It's a bit different from the HR landing pages that you've seen or currently have. So this is where they have reimagined the intranet not just as a static repository of policy and procedures and other boring documents, but actually a true personal dashboard that we've been yada-yadaing about for ages, but have largely delivered fairly crap examples. So this is where we have a standard of design that we take for granted on public sites now being applied internally. And that's really, really exciting. And I think it's the tip of the iceberg to say when we apply modern UX, modern experience design to intranets, maybe this is the kind of thing that we launch. And then there's the whole social thing. And there's been huge examples of it in terms of completely taking over intranets and delivering massive transformative social intranets and stuff like this, and that's good. But I also like examples like this. This is from Oricon, so a professional services company. They have your classic corporate news on the left, you know, again with the images and the descriptions and the various announcements and the highlighted internal advertising and all of that traditional stuff on the intranet. But on the right is their social feed. So there is the activity stream being included on the intranet, really in a very natural and low-key way, like, well, haven't we been doing this forever? Now, maybe we should have been. And they've introduced gamification, not in some trendy way, but again in an elegant, low-key, integrated way that just encourages usage and adoption of this stuff. And this is where we start to see some just casual blending of the worlds of your traditional content and comms-oriented intranets, plus the best that you can get around social and collaborative tools, not as separate islands, but as the one site. And I think coming up, I hope, is Elaine's talk about how to do this in SharePoint and the nitty-gritty, and it's not yet elegant, but it is still nonetheless relatively straightforward. And then we talk about the meat of where SharePoint is the most effective, which is around the business process stuff, around the business systems, automating forms, replacing clunky traditional systems. This is from Hanson Young, a mid-sized building company in Australia, by which I mean they only turn over about 2 billion, which I think is quite good really, but apparently that's still only mid-sized. We gave them a Platinum Intranet Innovation Award last year for this, which is SharePoint and Intex. So, well, the so is they use that technology to automate one of the two fundamental business processes for a building company, winning work and building stuff. So this is the winning work bit. And they replaced a whole pile of clunky and manual and discoordinated approaches for bidding on work and pulling in the best examples and working out the costs with a fully automated business process built in Intex, which is now the core of how they work. And you look at it and it's horribly complex, except if you do this stuff, in which case it's really directly obvious. And I asked them, yeah, okay, I've seen IT managers talk about this for ages, but convince me. Right? Convince me that this actually works. Do people use it? And they went, well, yeah, obviously. What do you mean, obviously? Well, the people who bid on work, well, they helped us design it. So, of course, it meets their needs. Yeah, that thing. And so actually sitting in behind this is a really excellent process for not just doing a traditional BA process, but actually working hand in hand with the business, with good UX, with the good development practices to implement a solution like this, such that when the banks turned up and said, hey, tough times, 2 of your major peers have gone bust in the last year, convince us why we should keep giving you money. They said, well, look, actually, have a look at this, and from this form comes out a real-time list, what they call reporting for free. So this is all the Power BI, Power Pivot and stuff like this you get for free, where they're able to pull up graphs of saying, this is exactly the work we're bidding on, the value of it, this is the work that we've won, this is the pipeline over the next 6, 12, 18 months of our expected cash flow from these projects. And the banks went, yeah, that's good, keep going. And that was the last they heard of the banks. And then you can go off and, do funky stuff with, maps, GIS and stuff like that. All of which is a natural byproduct of capturing stuff and using SharePoint as a core business system. And I think this is actually one of the most powerful examples of this, not just in the world of building companies, but probably in the world, full stop. All developed without a massive budget, over an 18-month period of steadily incremental development with a blended team between internal staff and a SharePoint implementer. It's a beautiful example, and I'll talk more about that model later. There's, of course, the mobile thing. So this is a mobile solution delivered by Coca-Cola Enterprises, which is the bit primarily in Europe. This is their replacement for the SAP leave form. Noting they haven't replaced SAP, they've just replaced the really, really crap user experience of SAP with this, which is delivered on SharePoint 2010 in 8 different languages out to mobile devices supporting BYOD. It was a fiddly thing to get going, but it wasn't a huge project and it wasn't massively complex. And now staff are saying, well, we really love this and we still really hate SAP, so can you tell us, couldn't you replace the desktop experience with this? Which is an example of something that I predicted 2 years ago, which is where mobile is starting to stage a reverse revolution, where people are starting to say, so if you can do that, why is our desktop experience still so crap? Which is a fair question, I think. And the last example I want to show is from Barclay. So we got them out as a keynote for our intranet conference in Sydney a few months ago. So this is their mobile solution out to their 30,000 staff in branches who historically weren't even trusted with an email address, let alone intranet access. So it's delivering classic news, it delivers the top 500 knowledge base articles, there's some innovation stuff, and a pile of other things. It's not rocket science, but what has it done? It's reduced customer complaints about product knowledge by 50%. It has increased staff engagement by 22%. It has improved the Net Promoter Score by 2%. Oh, and it's saved £1 million in the first year, just from eliminating the printing of all of the bump that they sent out to all the branches that didn't work anyway. It is super simple with the results that are truly remarkable. And they're now going on to do a whole new generation of this, which actually should have launched about last month, so I must follow it up. So what have I just shown you? Well, I've just shown you a whirlwind tour of a whole pile of different stuff in every possible direction. But okay, so which bit are you guys going to do? How are you going to pick? Because hopefully you're enthusiastic, but you can't do all of that. So which of these things are you going to do? Which direction are you going to head? And so that's where there are a heap of questions that may still be in your mind about this whole intranet, SharePoint and project thing that you're about to undertake. So how do we answer some of these? So let's look at that. So I guess this is the starting point, the classic quote, failing to plan is planning to fail. So what does planning look like? And I guess there's 4 practical principles that underpin everything that we do around this, and for that matter, when I took 6 months off work to do the whole owner-builder thing, having started from not being able to hang a picture to being a full-time project manager and builder's labourer, I applied these same principles. And the first one is actually have a plan. Now, I'll take a piece of paper. A napkin is probably not quite enough. A 50-page complex document, if you have to, but in reality it's probably too much. I will take merely a single sheet of paper, maybe written on both sides, or maybe a little bit more. It's about reducing the uncertainties as early as possible. And this is a classic project management principle, but it's something that actually, it's surprising how far you can get in a project without actually working some of the key things out, like what are we actually delivering and how are we actually going to do it, and is it in fact doable or not, cheap or expensive. So let's take some steps to reduce those uncertainties. Whatever we deliver should work for staff, and I'll talk about how we achieve this. And at the end of the day, though, probably the most critical thing is that the intranet and SharePoint and the project is all a means to an end. It's not a goal in itself. Having an intranet is nice and all, but it's only valuable if it's, well, valuable for the business. So let's make sure we do the things that maximizes the value, that ensures that the money and time and resources we pour into the platform and the project and the technology actually do remarkable things for the business. So look, nothing rocket science in that list. But this is the principles that I'm going to, I guess, come back to throughout this talk. But what I really want to share is something that I have been scribbling on a napkin for a while now, and something that I've been using in a lot of my work, because a lot of what we get involved in is being parachuted into complexity and being required to help people very quickly come to order. And a lot of this is about starting from this point. Hey, you know, we want a intranet thing. Great. A really good one, though. Good. So maybe what we need to do is maybe we need to funnel down. Maybe we need to funnel down to take the steps that at each step gets greater and greater clarity around the project. And this is the fundamental metaphor that I've found very helpful, and hopefully you will too. So what does this look like? So there's around starting with understanding the needs in the organisation. From that, maybe we should work out some sort of strategy, and obviously from that, a scope. What are we actually going to deliver? And it's important to actually do the design work up front before we get stuck into the technology. And also, and this is the really critical bit, is we need to find the right partner. Out of all the lovely folks over in the vendor booths, which of those guys is going to be the right fit for your project? Right, then there's the build stuff. Right, so now we're building out until we get to the end of the project. And there's all of the technical stuff. So this is now working out the technology specifics of what we're building and how. It's around building the platform. It's around writing the code, deploying the solution, configuring, customization, all of this stuff. And hey, the actual launch and ongoing stuff. Now I'm going to walk through each of these steps, but I'm giving you the shape of it. And obviously the goal is to start from the, hey, we've got this idea, to narrow down to a clear approach, and then expand out to deliver something that will delight. So let's unpick this a little bit. Let's start with the first one, understanding staff and business needs. Now there are a bunch of ways of doing this. We like things like one-on-one interviews with staff, where, by the way, you don't talk about the intranet at all. Whatever you do, don't ask staff what they want. Right? Because what's the two possible answers to that? Hey, what would you like the new intranet to do? Right, everything, right, that's one answer. That's the wish list, not that helpful. What's the other answer? That's still the wish list. What else? I don't know. Right, so what could it do? Can you give me some hints? Right, because what do staff know about intranets? Well, as much as they've experienced from their current intranet or maybe some past ones, isn't that what we're supposed to know? So maybe instead we go out to understand the business, understand what staff do. Right, and this might be around one-on-one interviews, it might be around sitting and listening and observing in operational environments, and I'll talk more about this in a second. Hopefully it's not what we would now call retro research techniques, surveys and focus groups. We don't do those anymore. Hopefully you don't either. Ask me in a break if you're not sure why we shouldn't be doing those. We obviously also want to understand the current state of the intranet and talk to stakeholders to understand the business priorities, the business strategy, what their needs are as representatives of the business. So let me give you two stories as an example. So I've spent a lot of time in call centres. Call centres are different, really rather different from other places. Now you go in hopefully with a blank sheet of paper, right, with an open mind, open to the possibilities, open to understanding what the environment is about. But of course, you go in with a set of assumptions. It's human nature. So what do we want to deliver? Well, we want to deliver the most valuable solution for call centre staff. Great. So what would that be? Well, I guess that's the most common information, the information they need most often. That's the stuff we want to capture and put on the intranet, right? Oh, see, Zeb, you're on the mark. The answer is no, that's not right. Because actually, the most common stuff is in their head. Because they get 50 or 100 calls a day, so of course they know what the interest rate is on the main products or the common process for establishing a new account. It's actually the uncommon stuff. It's the tricky stuff. So it's about hey, well, I've moved from New Zealand to Australia for some reason. I don't know, my retirement account in New Zealand, look, I want to bring it across and transfer it to a super account, but I'm of this certain age and I did this special thing, and how do I do that? I have no idea. Let me just look that up. You might also think that when you see stuff like this, so this is all the product brochures on everyone's desk in these folders, that, my God, we're living in the dark ages, let's get all that stuff on the intranet, and you'd be wrong. Because actually, this works brilliantly, because someone rings up and they says, look, I'm thinking about opening up this account. I've got the brochure. Now, on page 18 it says this, but I'm not sure. What does that mean? Oh, yeah, look, what it's saying is this, but actually, if you flip back to page 15, there's a really good summary table, and that will help you to understand it better. So actually, that works brilliantly. What you need the intranet for is actually the old stuff. Because if I've opened up a retirement account in the 80s, then when I want to close that account to get my money out, then the conditions covering that are from the 80s policy. So if you have 5 or 10 products a year for 40 years, then oh my God. And in this particular environment, they had the policy cupboard, in which there was piles of old policies, in which you put someone to hold go and rifle through the cupboard and hope that A, we had a copy of it, and B, it wasn't sitting on someone's desk. So hey, why don't we just scan that and put that into a SharePoint document collection, and so then it's organised by year and name of product, and it's just PDFs, and it would work brilliantly. So this is the stuff you learn by going out into the field, even for a couple of days, and just watching and talking to people. Let me give you a different example. So we just recently finished a piece of work for Aviva, the global insurance company headquartered in the UK. New team puts their hand up and says, hey, I think we're going to own the global intranet. Yay for that. Hadn't been owned for 5 years. But they recognise that we don't actually know that much about the globe. Good on you. Right, let's help with that. So we went off and we did a piece of global research in Singapore, Poland, France, UK and Canada in a fast-paced month. It was actually quite a small piece. And what they were looking for was to really get an insight into where the advanced stuff could be done. So they wanted to know about activity-based working and mobile solutions and the difference between what people are doing at home versus work and stuff like that. And it turned out that actually people didn't need mobile solutions, and actually collaboration wasn't where the team expected. Because it wasn't in Singapore where the needs were hyper-local, where I don't care about the world. I don't care about Singapore. I don't actually care about my business division. I'm in a team of 5 and I work on processing this product. And it's the other 4 people I sit next to who I talk to is the only thing that I care about. That is my universe. Where did collaboration fit in? Actually, it's the top level of this. It's the communication team itself who do collaborate by having a monthly teleconference where everyone rings up. And how do they organise that? Well, by emailing in suggestions for the agenda. And how do they distribute the agenda? Well, by email. And then useful stuff comes out of these meetings. Oh, yeah. How's that distributed? Well, by email. I think we can help with this because actually you have Yammer and you have Newsgatter and you paid for licenses for both for some reason and you're not using either. Hey, let's talk about this whole modern collaboration thing. Something that they had not recognized, but it was bloody obvious when we went off and did the research. And so that's why we do this kind of research. But what are your questions? What are your questions in your mind about how to do this research or the tricky things around it? No questions. So this means you've all done it, right? So great. Yeah. Oh, jump in behind Zeb. Yes. So the question was, and have you already got a book? No, I should fix that. See, this is how we get rid of the books, right? See, now it becomes obvious. So the question was, how do you work out who to talk to? Right? You happen to be in a large telecommunication company, for example, hypothetically, and they're a huge organisation. Who do you talk to? And there's all these opinions, and from their own particular perspective, and how do you make sense of that? Well, first off, you try not to gather opinions. So again, you're not asking about what people want the intranet to do, because otherwise they say, oh, like Facebook. Yeah, that really wasn't that helpful, thanks. But actually, what you're looking for are the patterns. You're looking for the commonality, because actually I'm not going to try and solve 500 problems, because I can't. I'm actually looking for the top 5 or 10 where we're going to target the project, and it's obvious. It will always be obvious. It's amazing how quickly the commonalities come out and hit you in the face. Right? We don't do more than a week's research in almost any organisation. That's more than enough for a year or two's worth of projects. And by the end of the second day, we're starting to see some clear patterns. So it's actually really remarkably easy. Go off and have a chat to people with just a genuine sense of curiosity, and you will be surprised at the things you go, oh my God, how did we miss that? And it'll be different from organisation to organisation. And it may sound like I'm making light of this, that it's very glibly, don't worry, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Because I've done a lot of this stuff. So it is really interesting. So give it a go, see how you find it. There was another question down the front. Yeah, so it was more a comment than a question. The comment was, I want to go off and talk with people who do the actual work, but I end up talking to their bosses and hear only about their fantasy land. Nice phrase, by the way. And yes, I have no use for managers, except to talk to them as managers about their needs as managers. So you want to cut out the middleman. You want to talk to the information users, not the information producers. And don't confuse stakeholders with staff. The two are not the same. You need to talk to both of them, but you would deal with stakeholders in a very different way. Maybe you'd get them all in a room and you'd workshop some stuff, and so you'd use classic workshopping and post-it noting and all the rest of the stuff with stakeholders, but you're right. That is the one challenge to overcome, is that you must talk to real people. And the one guaranteed way of failing at research is only talking to stakeholders, and then you end up getting this bland thing where you go, yeah, I don't feel I've come away with any better understanding of what's happening. But that's okay. You just got to be on top of that and guide that process, either as an internal person or as an external person going in and doing the work. One more quick question, and Zeb, you can hold your thought till later. Yep.
So how do you deal with conflicting senior management expectations?
Well, so you're saying, how do we pull together the strategy when involving senior managers and stakeholders who might have conflicting requirements? Nice segue. Good job. So maybe you get them in a workshop, for example. I mean, I want to say that there are a few problems that can't be solved by getting everyone in the room at the same time and having a good argument. Because what you don't want to be is piggy in the middle. You don't want to deal one-on-one with each of these groups, because then it's your job to keep them all happy, which you can't. And then it's your failure when you haven't met every need, which you can't. So get them in a room, all right, and have a debate around the role of the internet. Have a debate around the priorities in the business and how limited resources should be spent. And look, and obviously, hopefully you have a whole toolbox of workshop techniques around, affinity grouping and prioritization activities and scribbling and ideation and all this stuff. It also helps to show great examples of what the internet can be to open up people's minds around stuff. You also want to bring in the best practices, because it's not just, hey, for example, we want to deliver a highly personalized homepage where users will configure their own experience because that'll put them in the driving seat. It's a brilliant idea, it just doesn't work. So I don't care how many people ask us for that, we say no. Because let me tell you about the 100 people that have tried it and it doesn't work. Because you will never get more than 5 to 10% of people using it. So there are some universal best practices. As an industry, we've been doing the whole intranet thing now for well over a decade. So if there is some strategic thinking starting from a blank sheet of paper, you're doing it wrong. So look at what others have done and succeeded or failed at. And often the constraints will help to guide what you really can do. Yeah, that is an incredible priority, but there's absolutely no way it can be delivered in 6 months with 100 grand, so what can we do? Now, there's no magic answer to this, and there is always political debates and internal politics, but I guess that's the bit we've got to be good at, both as internal people and as external people helping organisations. One of the outputs I like from this kind of thinking is something like this. We invented a phrase for this, we called it an intranet concept. It's a single sheet of paper that covers 4 things. The current state, where do we want to get to in general terms, what are we delivering specifically in the next 6 to 12 months, whatever it is, and where do we go after that? And it's a really great exercise because it really helps you to crystallize down to say, no, what are we actually doing? And if all it talks about is we're deploying the new SharePoint 2013 platform and going through a process of migration and content cleanup, yeah, I don't think anyone cares at all. So that's a problem. Because actually this underpins your communications when you launch it. And if you go to write the communications at the beginning and it either doesn't make sense or it is the most boring thing ever, your project is wrong. Rethink until you actually have a description that people will care about. And from that, you will guarantee you actually have a project that is doing something worthwhile, more than just dealing with the behind-the-scenes stuff. We'll also highlight what we call our 6x2 methodology. There's a link to the article that describes how to do it. This is an incredibly simple prioritization technique that identifies what are the criteria. Why would we want to do something? What's it going to do for the organisation? It's going to improve comms or enhance knowledge management or increase staff engagement or stuff like this. But actually, what's it going to do for us as the intranet, as the project team? Is it going to demonstrate the value of the intranet? Is it going to build momentum for future stages? So that's the criteria. There's the constraints. There's a heap of them. Pick the top 6. Then take the wish list and brutally assess every item to ensure that it can be done in terms of the constraints and it is worth doing. Because there are 2 traps to avoid. So first off is the low-hanging fruit thing. Yeah, we can do it. It avoids all the constraints. It just isn't worth doing. Who cares? So you can deliver low-hanging fruit until the sun burns out and it doesn't lead to anything. The flip side is the challenge driven because of our great passion, where we try to do the stuff that needs to be done but can't. Where we try and do an end run around the constraints. We try to tunnel under them or high jump over them. Look, we'll try and find a way around this one because it's so important that we have to deliver it. That's the reason why 3 years on we still haven't launched. So you want that perfect sweet spot of the stuff that is not just doable but worth doing. It's an incredibly simple technique. It is one of a bunch of prioritization techniques out there. Use the one of your choice. We use this a lot, and it works well if you make it mean. So that's the strategy side of things. Any questions about that? I'll just whip through it quickly. Okay. Because then I think it starts to get into the nitty-gritty when we start to talk about the scope of the intranet. So we talk about the 5 purposes of intranets. I have a collectible set of cards that I can give you if you come up to me later that outlines the 5 purposes. So this is content and communication, the 2 classic roles of intranets. The collaboration piece, tremendously hot as a topic, but kind of a broad umbrella. What do we mean? What are we trying to do with it? The culture piece, about reflecting the hopefully wonderful culture the organisation has, putting a human face to what we're delivering, but also supporting culture change. And that's often around things like the One Firm initiative and stuff like that. And then there's the activity, the business process side of things. This is the intranet as a place for doing things, not just for reading things. And this is where SharePoint really, really shines. And there's a link. We've got a free white paper that walks through the 5 purposes and gives you some examples. And we use this often as a set of sliders, as a framework for having the conversation in organisations about, well, where are we going to focus? Because going back to that huge spectrum of possibilities I showed you in the screenshots at the beginning, well, which direction are we going to go? What are we going to focus on? And so this is where we can start to say, well, in this project, at this point, what are we going to target? So if we go back to some of those examples, so if we actually revisit the news limited example, so it's all about content, comms, and actually culture. Because this is an organisation that is going through massive disruptive change. This is the classic rebuild the plane while it's still flying thing. You have to deliver a newspaper every morning, without exception, with news stories in it. Exactly the same way you have for the last 100 years, while simultaneously transforming the entire company to be something that is meaningful in a digital age. So this is the organisation going from 19 separate newspapers, where when you've got the Melbourne Cup on, they historically sent 19 reporters to cover the Cup. So that'd be the one race, right? With the one result. But they had no national news desk. They had no way of sending one person. They didn't have a national advertising desk. They didn't have a national editorial or production facility. So they're changing all this stuff, and this was the visible face of it. And one of their goals in the 6x2 planning, because all of this was developed from woe to go in 3 months, we helped with the strategy, the internal team did a brilliant build. One of the key goals was to reflect News Corp as Australia's #1 media company. So what do they surface? The brilliant news and media that is produced. So this is the showcase in the middle of the picture of the week, the story of the week, the video of the week. This is the news in pictures pulled from the feed that has been already developed to surface this stuff in. It's the news stories and details about the organisational transformation. Now, this intranet is already gone because they've moved on from this as they have continued to consolidate as an organisation, and their 5 purposes, priorities have shifted, which is as it should be. So this is the intranet as a living platform. Whereas if we look at the Hanson Young example, this is about all activity all the time. The intranet homepage, which I didn't show you, is ugly and kind of sparse because they're not focusing on the content and comm side of things. They have, at least at the moment, effective offline ways of doing that, particularly in a construction environment. For them, it's about the business process stuff, which is good. And so they're deliberately focusing on that, and then they can come and backfill in some of the other stuff at a later phase. Maybe they'll focus on the collaboration piece next, which is in fact what they are looking at. So this gives you a sense of how there isn't one right answer. It's about having a clear sense of what are we going to deliver. And why is this important? Because this then drives a heap of practical SharePoint decisions. What are we turning on? What are we leaving off? What are we using in terms of out-of-the-box capabilities versus third-party solutions? Are we going to customize and do development? In which case, in which areas? Or where are we going to say, this is not our priority at this point, therefore we're going to focus on out-of-the-box functionality? And these are all kind of important things to know. And so then from this, so we've talked to users and understood the business needs, we've got a strategy and a scope, and now we think about the design of things. And this is where we apply great UX techniques, user experience, information architecture techniques, things like wireframes, card sorting, tree testing, usability testing, all of this good stuff that has been used for a decade and is absolutely every bit as applicable to SharePoint Intranets as it is for any other intranet project, as it is for websites or any other solution. And it's interesting, it's where you can actually start to have some really good conversations. So this is Stockland, building company in Australia. We helped them design their solution, which has ended up being very brightly coloured. And so this is one of their landing pages. This is their HR landing page, on which there are boxes, and in those boxes are groups of links. This page was really carefully designed. We tested this with staff, and why? Because these pages are the single most important pages on your intranet, far more important than the home page, and this is what you should be delivering. Groups of links. It's a simple concept, it's immensely powerful. Every intranet should be using this. Huge lists, useless. I don't care whether you sort them alphabetically or via importance, or whether you can filter them by who authored them or not. Huge lists are useless. So what do we need? We need good navigation with plain English links, without jargon, without acronyms, without system names. That means you can get to this page and go, there are 50 links on this page, but yet in 5 seconds I know where I'm going. So you can devote resources to the handful of pages that are going to have the greatest impact on stuff. What was then good was that once they delivered their 1.0 intranet, they bedded that in and they said, right, now we're ready for our 2.0 intranet with that whole collaboration thing. And we really want to put that now at the heart of things. But they did several things that were super smart. So first off, they had a strategic conversation about saying, so this whole collaboration thing, what do we mean by that? So is it about saying when we are constructing or even designing the houses for the housing estates we create, is it about the architects sharing the latest in green building practices? Is it the salespeople following up leads between themselves in terms of selling houses? Is it about the shopping centre managers supporting each other or getting help from head office? Or is it about the head office teams running projects, classic IT projects or other things, or any or all of those things? And so for them, they said, actually, it's about the conversation things. And we're going to focus on the communities of practice and the communities of interest in the organisation. That was the first smart thing. And they branded that. And then what they did was they then designed it. How do we want this to work? How are we now going to change the homepage now that we're incorporating this functionality? And so there is a very deliberate design process that gives you a chance to talk through the relative priorities, to test stuff with staff. And at the time, using NewsGator, where they say, yeah, you can have anything you want as long as you realise that our activity stream will be 468 pixels wide, take it or leave it. Right, that's a constraint. We can work around that. They've now fixed it. So then you launch a new homepage that has the classic comms and other functionality, but now the collaboration and the activity stream folded in. And that comes from a very deliberate design process that ensures that what you deliver, coming back to the 4 principles, what you deliver will work for staff. Because if it doesn't do that, why bother? So that's the design process. A whole heap. I've written a whole book on that with dots on it. Any questions about the design process for things? Down the front. The shop window concept. Oh, yes. Here, have a book. So one of the things that we talk about when I was writing dots, I needed a metaphor. And one of the metaphor that I came to is the idea of a shop window versus a back office area. So what am I talking about? So if I talk about, say, the HR team. So the HR team delivers services to the rest of the organisation. Now that might be systems in terms of the leave process or the leave form. It might be documents in terms of the policies, procedures and stuff like that. That is their shop window to the rest of the organisation. And like any shop window in the real world, it's well lit. It all has nice shelves and things are all lined up with good labels, you know, and when you wander into the store, there's enough space between the aisles, you can wander around, and you put that shop and its shop window on a nice busy thoroughfare so lots of people walk past it. And what do we design shop windows for? We design it for, well, the customer, obviously. And it's the same on intranets. We design these pages for the wider organisation. But HR internally has a heap of stuff they're doing within their own team. So they've got their internal processes, their internal planning, their draft documents, their collaborative stuff. So actually, they need a space for themselves. And this is their back office area behind the door that says it's for employees only. And it is absolutely critical in intranets we pull the two things apart. Because wherever you can, you avoid structuring the shop windows according to the org chart. Because if you have to know who owns it in order to be able to do it, you're in a lot of trouble. The classic example is travel. You've got 30 seconds, work out who belongs to. HR, no. Finance, no. No. So IT, no. So really tricky. So, but behind the scenes for the back office, well, absolutely that's designed for the org chart in mind, for what is needed there. And the perfect example of that was the Wintech case study, right, that hopefully everyone saw yesterday, as a back office solution, truly astronomically good, because what did it do? It empowered the organisation within those areas to make full advantage of SharePoint, to automate business processes, to replace paper forms, to get rid of Excel spreadsheets and put them with lists. Absolutely spectacular. And that's the back office area, but that's very different from the much more ordered shop window that you also want. I don't know, did that answer your question? Let me push on. So then, having gone through this process, we get to the partner selection, because now we know what the staff and business needs, we've got a strategy, we've got a scope and plan, we have some designs. Now we can go off to people and say, great, can you build it? How much is it going to cost to be built? But also, equally importantly, are you the right person for the job? And this is really your classic job interview side of things. And so it's as much asking about how organisations do the work as it is what they've done. And so we want to understand that as to whether the partner is the right fit, because there's a heap of them and they work in different ways. What's also super interesting is that what we're seeing, and increasingly what we are recommending, is that organisations engage with SharePoint implementers in different ways. So traditionally there was the big bang project. We go off with our tender, we spend 100 grand, 300 grand, 3 months time, bang out the solution, partner leaves, hey, we've finished. I don't know how that's worked for you. I won't speak ill of it. But let's just say what we've seen has been patchy. Instead, what we've seen, so if we look at the solution that was done by Hanson Young and the business process stuff, that's where they partnered in a blended process with an agency where the partner sat in the organisation for 1 or 2 days a week for 18 months and still to this day, working side by side with the business team. And it's a beautiful model, because then you've got the ongoing SharePoint expertise, which you really super need, and really great people, but at a pace you can make sense of, at a pace where you can build up a process internally about how to deliver great stuff. And I'm really hoping that we're going to see some changes in the SharePoint industry more towards that model of partnering away from the whole big bang implementation and then nothing. But both are appropriate. And so it is, however, whichever way you go, super important to get this right, because obviously selecting the wrong partner can be problematic because SharePoint is not a simple beast and you want the best help you can get. And by the way, if you're back at some of the earlier stages around scope and the design side of things and you feel that you need some extra technical expertise in order to make some of those decisions, which is right and proper, then engage a partner for just that, to come in an advisory role. Then you get them to pitch alongside everyone else. They've got a head start, good for them, but it's an otherwise level playing field. I mean, we did this in the Stockland project, actually. There was us, the client, and the SharePoint implementers, and we thought, oh my God, 3 people around a table, this is going to be a disaster. And it was beautiful because the organisation said, hey, this is what we need to do. Great. We would go, yeah, but let's actually just step up and think about the strategy and the bigger picture. And the SharePoint folks would go, well, actually, there are these 3 ways of doing it. Probably best to do it this way, not these other 2 ways, because these ways don't work. And the relationship was brilliant, because actually everyone wanted the same result. And I've seen this in a number of the presentations around saying getting the right people for the right bits of the project. Oh, 3 minutes. Now this bit in the middle is not me. Hopefully your heads are well and truly full already from the wonderful speakers. The rest of the conference around the actual SharePoint technical stuff, I will say nothing of that. I will, however, talk about this last bit, which is saying, hey, we should probably launch it. We should probably manage the change process and help people to be successful with it. It's that whole governance thing. But as much as anything, it's about the ongoing management and then planning for the next stage. Now the funky stuff, right? The funky stuff is your classic launch video. I'll show you a bit of this.
With digital tools, we can all discover, share, and do things more quickly. But jumping from window to window, trying to find the right info can really slow you down. So what if you could find everything you need in one place? Well, you can. With iConnect, our intranet site. iConnect looks and works the same wherever you are, except it speaks your language. It's your digital home for news, tools, resources, and content that's personal to you. Let's check it out. You can discover what's happening in your country and across the whole company. See something that interests you? Share it with your contacts in a quick click. Or add a page to My Favorites, so it's right there whenever you need it.
You get the idea. It's up on YouTube. What is this doing? It's inspiring, but it's also informing. 2 of the 3 purposes of a launch video. It's because actually maybe people haven't noticed those icons. Maybe they don't know what they do. Maybe when we launch this stuff, hey, we should probably tell people about it and help them to actually use it. And obviously videos are cool and they're super easy to do. It's not the end of the thing. Obviously what you also have to do is the balloons and the mouse mats and the mugs. They're the important things, just to make that clear. And maybe around the governance, there's a heap of stuff, a whole talk in itself. You know, I quite like this. The blue and green's a bit hard to see. This is a lovely wizard-based approach done by Standard Chartered in the UK for creating new team sites. And it helps guide people through to say, okay, well, what type of team site do you want? What does it offer you? What are your details? How long do you need it for? What's your name? What's a secondary name? Which turns out to be tremendously useful when you try and hunt down the dead site and the person's left. So now I've doubled the chances of someone still being around. So there's a pile of governance stuff in behind this. And there's the metrics and measures. This is a nice example from PwC's recent intranet relaunch on SharePoint. Right, this is about saying, we're going to target 4 things: productivity, client experience, expertise, and the simplification of the business. And here's how we're tracking on all of this stuff. So this is aligning it back into the business priorities. But I might have given you the impression that this is a vast thing, but it doesn't have to be. So if we go back to these 4 fundamental purposes, then we can actually look at saying, let's size the approach to fit. So maybe if I'm a small organisation, maybe if I'm 250 people, then what am I going to do? I'm going to spend 2 days talking to staff and another 2 days talking to the business. Right, 4 days, less than a week. I'm going to come up with some business goals and a purpose, which I'm going to write on 3 pieces of paper, no more. I'm going to use the 5 purposes to outline in maybe 5 pages what we're going to do and what we're not, in bullet points and lists and simple stuff like that. I'm going to do some sketches, maybe no more than that. They could be just scribbles, but some well thought out scribbles about what we want to achieve. They don't have to be sexy wireframes. I am going to look very carefully at who we pick and go through a clear evaluation process. And at the end, I'm going to focus super strongly on 2 things: ownership and the ongoing responsibilities. Because the ownership is the key bit, because launching something that isn't owned and managed is completely pointless. It'll be dead in 3 years, let's start all over again. So that's not big, but it is clear. And so this is where I'd say that this is a brilliant platform. You can deliver brilliant solutions. But the clearer you are on what you want, the greater those benefits are. And I would focus on funneling down. If you're at that mushy beginning bit, yeah, we want, something, then say, what do we need to do to funnel down to a clearer solution to the point where we're confident at pushing the button and getting going? And how do we get there as quickly as possible? Because if you are still funneling down a year later, you're doing it wrong. All right, this could be done in 2 weeks. This could be done in 3 months, depending on the size of the project. Because then you can build with confidence, which is obviously kind of important. And on that note, I will say thank you. So we have time for one last question. I've got a book to give away over here. I'm friendly. Come up and chat with me. I'm here until afternoon tea, where I have to bugger off back across the ditch.
Easiest question. Will these slides be available?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I have a book for that. Yes. You weren't listening at the beginning, but that's okay. The slides are already up on SlideShare. I'll be blogging it in the next little while, and it'll be up on the site, the conference site. So thank you. Come up and say hello.